Well, there was the announcement yesterday that the ANC Secretary-General, Ace Magashule, now going to appear in front of the ANC's Integrity Commission on Saturday after he's been charged with corruption relating to the Free State asbestos scandal. But also confirmation he will not be stepping aside at the moment, despite huge pressure on the ANC on this issue. Joined now by two analysts, Professor Hanyane and Sanusha Naidu. Professor Hanyane, if I may start with you, good afternoon to you. This has been part of a really long dynamic in the ANC around corruption, around claims that people are losing faith in the ANC. Do you see this as a turning point in some way? Is this a moment where things in the party could change, or the path to sort of losing support could become inevitable?
Stephen, good afternoon to you. Good afternoon to your viewers. Look, you've touched on a very important word there, which is operative, and that word is change. I don't think the ANC, from a material point of view, is ready to bring in that much needed change. We've listened for a very long time to the rhetoric of unity, to the rhetoric of change. For me, what appeals the most is to modernize the party, is to strengthen the structures, is to make sure that issues of integrity are at the heart and at the center of rebuilding this party, a party that must respond to the challenges of the 21st century. You can talk about the building of branches, the election of members in branches. We should ask questions. Are all of these processes done in an honorable way? Are they done impartially? And are they all above question? Unfortunately, the ANC is somewhat found wanting in these respects and other related areas.
I mean, if you look through the history of democracy over the last sort of 200 years, and really for most of the world it's probably 100 years or less, or even less than that, you do find that political parties that stay in power for a long time they become sort of more corrupt. Now, this is a very general comment, but I mean, in Germany, Helmut Kohl was the Chancellor of West Germany for 17 years. Towards the end, corruption allegations started to come against him. In other countries, we've seen the same thing. I mean, you could look at the Conservative Party in the United Kingdom in the 1980s and 1990s. Is the ANC any different to other political parties that have stayed in power for a long time in a democracy?
No, it's not, Stephen. And let's not forget, it's important for us to come home. Let's reflect on the experiences and the track records of liberation movements in the continent. There isn't much to talk about there. Look at what is happening in Zimbabwe. Look at what has happened in other frontline states and many African countries. They have been plunged into disarray. There is rampant corruption, mismanagement of public resources. And all of this, it's born out of the comfort that is created by the electorate, the leaders who want to take advantage of that situation. And here we are as a continent, we're still reeling from these challenges without a shared hope of progress and prosperity.
Sanusha Naidu, if I may bring you in here, good afternoon to you. One of the things it seems to me that you could say happened in 2020, and obviously all of this is contested, everyone will have a different view, but I think even many members of the ANC would agree with this, is that it seems to me the party's leaders are more distant from voters than they have been in quite some time. And I'm talking specifically about the frustration that we hear from so many people around the scandals around PPE procurement, or the general scandals about what's been happening allegedly in the Free State, or the testimony that we hear at the Zondo Commission. Would that be a fair comment, that the ANC leadership perhaps has never been so far from the people as it is now?
Good afternoon, Stephen, and to the viewers and to Prof. I think you've basically captured a point where it's becoming further and further more distant from its electoral base. I think the question is really, how much does the ANC really win at the polls in terms of electoral support? I think, the way in which the system is crafted in the context of the electoral model, it tends to mask a lot of the fact that it's not winning that kind of 60%, and now it's dipped to below 60%. So it's not really at that point where I think in 2020, it just becomes much more of a stark reality of how fragmented the party is and how disconnected it is from its own electoral base. And of course, we've got to also qualify that. Who is this electoral base that still supports it, and why do they still support it? I mean, we just saw images now of the Secretary General looking at possibly a voter's roll and trying to find out, whether there are some people there that should be there or they should be in another ward or whatever. But this is the problem. The problem is we are too fixated on the idea of a minimalist electoral democracy, and that a lot of the issues that actually we should be thinking about, talking about in terms of a governance structure is not this idea that elections are the be, hold, and end all of everything. That somewhere along the line, the manipulation of the electoral ballot box or the electoral process becomes a kind of factor in what makes the distance between the party and its citizens. And this is where I think even when you talk about, let's take India, for example, and the Congress Party, and how that party has become so distant from its own electoral base, because they become comfortable in a position where they think that they could hang on to old age maxims and issues like, we liberated you, etc. I think we have a generation in South Africa and the world over, the millennial generation, who are not necessarily caught up in that nostalgia. They're not really thinking about the fact that, my father voted for you and I must have that loyalty. But the other problem with it is that they end up in parties where it's about what do I get if I actually start contesting elections. And I think the problem here is that it becomes the question of clientelism and patronage networks that become a key voting constituency for political parties.
I mean, these are live pictures, by the way, that we're seeing of Ace Magashule. He's speaking right now in Ekurhuleni. He's on the campaign trail. Professor Hanyane, we talk about voting, we talk about distance between the party and voters. It must be said, surely, that the other problem, the other situation is that the opposition parties simply aren't putting enough pressure on the ANC. I would argue if the Democratic Alliance was gaining voters in last year's election instead of losing them, if the economic freedom fighters were gaining more votes by a sort of multiple of 5 to 10 percentage points in every election instead of, sort of between 3 and 4%, if the IFP wasn't losing a bit of support in some places, I would suggest that the debates within the ANC around corruption might be a bit sharper.
Perhaps not, Stephen. One needs to look at the structural capacity of the ANC as it stands. I mean, it's not a party. Let's accept that. This is a broad church. It can amass support from labor, from cultural organizations. We've seen some musicians coming out in the open in support of it. It has sort of like enjoyed this huge following across different facets of society that we should give to the ANC. But that in itself is dangerous because it then opens up to various ideologies and it does not accommodate dissent as well. And this is why we're sitting with a problem of individuals and leaders within the ANC talking in different terms. You listen to the spokesperson saying something, you listen to the chairman saying something. It reflects the complex nature of its formation and its operation. And I don't see opposition in this country having the will and the capacity to unseat the strength of the ANC. What we should look forward to is the ANC becoming its own enemy, breaking up, and hopefully seeing further political organizations emanating from them. Then we can see real democratic contestation.